Personally, I wish that nobody ever found it.
You know, I was pretty certain it was real. It's one of those things you're looking at it and you're appreciating it and you know that it probably shouldn't be here. On the other hand, you can't forget about it once you know it, that it might be something extraordinarily unusual.
Well, it was a friend and a client, Rich Payton, had contacted me, and he had been in the community school for whatever reason and happened to notice the painting on the wall and read it. And Rich is a person that's well read and has a lot of knowledge in innumerable areas. And he called me and he says, "Gee, I saw this picture called the Afghans. I think it may have some value."
Well, I'd seen it many years ago when I was younger. We were in here for the service and I looked across. I said, "Well, that's a lot better than I remember it." I said, "Well, let's take a closer look at that." You know, I was pretty certain it was real. I spoke to my wife about it, and she was an administrator in a school system that has an a museum that has some, rare pieces in it. I said, "Well, what do you think?" I mean, I've been involved in North Attleboro, and this may or may not be received well. She says, "Well, if something happens to it, I'm the principal. I'm responsible. Kid throws a book at it, I'm responsible. The roof leaks on it, I'm responsible. We need to know these things about the assets that we're charged with protecting." I spoke with Dave Mnuchin, who was chairman of the school committee, and he does some work for me. He's a lawyer, and said, "You have an important piece of art, perhaps, that should be looked at."
Right after that, I called Rick and I said, "Gee, remember the Afghans painting?" And he had some recollection of it. A client of mine told me that it may be worth some money. Why don't we look into it?
This gentleman came to see me, and he had done his homework, had a lot of research completed, including evidence of the recent sale the year before for $1.8 million, another one of this artist's productions. And he counseled me regarding interactions with Sotheby's, which led me to take photos of the painting and to mail them to Sotheby's, along with the completion of just a form that I got online. They said they'd be in touch in 4 weeks, and certainly they were at the beginning of January of 2007. On the morning I received the initial phone call from Sotheby's after they had reviewed the information that I had mailed into them about a month before. The head of the Russian art department called me, and she first said, "Are you sitting down?" And I said yes, and she explained that this painting done by this artist would be expected to bring between $2 and $3 million, and she was confident that they would be able to make this happen. Sotheby's helped us contact a company, I think they were from Middleborough, Massachusetts, I think. I could be mistaken about that. And what they do is they transport things of value. So it took a month for this to be put in place, and they showed up, I think it was Friday, February 4th, 2007. And they took the painting out. They had a crew of about 8 guys. We did have the police chief, Mike Gould, come. And I can tell you that during that month, I knew that the thing might be worth $3 million, and it's still hanging on the wall in our elementary school. And I thought about it every day, to the point where, nervous energy, I was over in that school more often than I typically would be, just looking at it, making sure it was still there. And after the story broke, the principal told me that he was relieved because he thought he was in trouble because I was in his building so often. It left on a Thursday, and we called other school committee members. I called members of the Board of Selectmen. Everybody was very happy.
Well, I found out the Friday before the school committee meeting where the announcement was going to be made. I got a call from Superintendent Richard Smith. He indicated that we had a valuable piece of artwork that had been identified by a civilian, and that they went in, they removed it, and they put it in a secure location at Sotheby's down in New York. My first reaction was, we need to stabilize the situation and secure it.
I was surprised, that it was worth the kind of money that was being thrown around at that point. I was surprised, and I certainly understood, how the value of the painting kind of changed things.
This is like a, Antiques Roadshow. It was one of those things that was hiding out in plain sight. So my first reaction was, this is going to be great for the arts of the school in North Attleboro.
Rick always reminds me of the story when we put the painting on the cargo van to wave bye-bye to it. And I don't remember this, but there's one thing I wanted from the painting. It was a plaque in the bottom that said the Afghans, and it said gift to the town, the gift to the Attleboro schools of, and it had the names of the people that gave it. And instinctively I said, I want that, and that's the only thing I took from the painting, and we gave it to then Town Council Chip McGuire for safekeeping. And he said, what do you want that for? And I said, it's evidence of a gift. And this is before we knew what was going to go on with this painting, and I said, I want that.
You turned to me and said, you realize our problems are just starting with this.
You can imagine our disbelief and how dismayed we were to read in the paper Saturday morning that the painting had been removed from the wall in the auditorium where my grandfather hung the painting over half a century ago. Further, this gift of art, because of its current value, had been discovered, had been sent to Sotheby's for auction. Let there be no mistake, we've always known that this was a fine work of art and of significant value. I was unaware of its current market value, but I am not surprised.
How would you want to be Greg Smith? Pick up Saturday's paper, and there's a painting that your grandfather allowed, according to them, allowed the town to put in the auditorium for people to view. I was told that they couldn't find the donor family on a Friday. I think it was taken off the wall on a Thursday. I was told they didn't know who the donor family was. At 6:45 that morning, Mr. Smith that owned Standard Chain was at my garage. It was his grandfather that donated the painting, which amazed me.
Mr. Smith and I did meet Saturday after the newspaper article was in the paper. He took advantage of that opportunity to express his concerns with finding this information in the newspaper prior to being contacted. And then on Saturday morning, I got a call from one of the members of the Board of Selectmen telling me that he had a visit from Mr. Smith. And it was suggested that I might want to talk to Mr. Smith, which I did that Saturday morning at his home. We had different opinions regarding what should happen with the painting. And I told him that this was a unique opportunity to help children. And the message I received was that North Attleboro needs culture. And that's pretty much where that ended.
My family is of the opinion that this gift of art, a gift of culture, hung in a place of prominence for all the townspeople to enjoy, managed to escape harm right where it was for 55 years. It was in no immediate danger, and with just a fraction more effort to find us, those who have taken it upon themselves to remove it could have discussed their thoughts regarding its value with the family that donated the painting.
Virtually everyone on the Board of Selectmen I spoke to, and everyone on town side of government, when we announced the fact of we took this painting, we had it, and we shipped it off for safekeeping, they thought it was great. Glad you didn't tell anybody. We can sell it. We get a lot of money for the school kids. It changed overnight. And the only thing I can think of that changed it overnight was Mr. Smith's reproach to then Selectman Rhino, or now Selectman Rhino, and everything changed.
I would ask that we really go slow on this selling of the painting vote tonight. We have a family that donated it that has been in this town for generations. I think that I would recommend, if we all could, to work together with the family to come up with a remedy that we all can live with.
John Rhino approached me as I was sitting down to take my seat to start the meeting and said, we have to slow down. We have some people that may not want to do this, and we've got to slow down and discuss it.
Everything's a rush to judgment. Let's slow down here. That family had done a lot for this community over the years.
Mr. Thompson was a lifelong resident of North Attleboro. He and his wife both graduated from North Attleboro High School. Their 3 adult children all graduated from North Attleboro High School. Mr. Thompson was principal of the Vos Gallery in Boston, dealing in fine arts his whole career. The gallery was started by his grandfather, Seth Vos, who was also a lifelong resident of North Attleboro.
I never actually knew Mr. Thompson, who gave the painting, but I knew Greg Smith and his wife and their family, who lived on South Washington Street for many years as I can remember they were there, and always were quietly supportive and contributing to the community.
In fact, I think if you go back, you will find that when the clock at the police station needed more money to be completed, he wrote the check. He doesn't like to be acknowledged about that, but there are certain things that you really have to acknowledge people for what they do.
Greg Smith was a businessman in town and runs a business which still exists today, employed many people in this community, was always a kind and respectful business owner who treated his people well, and no one had anything but good feelings about that family.
You have a misperception regarding how well known it is in this community that the Thompson-Smith family made that donation. And I know I've discussed that with you since I met with you Saturday. I want to tell you that it was not an easy thing to determine. As a matter of fact, we were not able to determine who the donors are.
We never heard of the Smith family until, I never heard of it until Rick told me, long after we got, well, that weekend after we got the painting out of town.
There's no way we're going to enter into a negotiation with anyone regarding what we should be doing with this thing. Okay, we're told it's worth millions of dollars. Secure and insure. That was it.
It would seem Mr. Mnuchin, upon discovering that this painting may have increased in value recently, did only a very small amount of investigating into the history and the family who donated this painting.
He was kind of shocked that it had just disappeared, especially when he found out that the plaque identifying who the donors was taken off the painting, and it was spirited out of town very quietly, and the people that were on the plaque weren't consulted at all. They would think that since they were the donors, they'd be consulted about what was going to happen with the painting. And shipping it off to Sotheby's to be auctioned was certainly disrespectful to the family.
We didn't discuss it with the Smith family because we didn't know the Smith family. But they were never going to be able to convince us that we shouldn't get the thing out of town. And regrettably, that took a month, where only Mr. Mnuchin and I and the person that brought it to his attention knew the story. We took the vow of silence.
It was taken off the wall, sent to Sotheby's. Nobody knew it.
The school committee immediately just pulled it out of the building and sent it to to a safe haven, which is okay. But before anybody really had an opportunity to talk about it,
the decision was made to take the painting down and to remove it from town down to Sotheby's in New York, and the entire school committee wasn't aware of it at the time, just the superintendent of schools and the chairman of the school committee, who was Dave Mnuchin. And I don't take issue with that. I understood their thought process and the reason behind doing it quickly, so I wasn't a school committee member that felt that I wasn't informed properly enough. I was certainly informed after it was taken down and removed.
You've suggested that we should not have taken the action that we've taken to secure and ensure the property, and I'm going to suggest to you that we would have been irresponsible to not take those steps. And I'm going to also follow up and say, if anybody in this community knew that that painting was of that value, it did not approach me to suggest that I take those steps, then that person was irresponsible. We did contact somehow, can't remember exactly how, a detective who recovers stolen art treasures around the world. He just happens to be from Massachusetts. And we talked to him at length multiple times about this whole story. And I just remember a few things that he said to me that seemed to be of great importance. He said to me, Rick, there are people watching this story right now who are planning on how they're going to steal this if you bring it back to town.
About the same time, the pharmaceutical company in Mansfield got broken into by people dropping down into the ceiling and defeating the alarm systems. They stole about $1 million in pharmaceuticals. A year later, another group dropped through the ceiling of a jewelry in Attleboro and stole millions of dollars of jewelry. Ultimately, they were arrested, but they defeated those sophisticated security systems. The mission here has always been about the kids.
The important thing to remember about this painting is it's being secured, it's insured, it's safe, nothing's going to happen to it, theft, fire, or damage, and we are not, if we do sell the painting, we will not be charged any storage fees. So, and it states it in the letter that we did receive from Sotheby's.
We did go out to bid with this, okay? Sotheby's and Christie's bid on it. Sotheby's won the bid because they offered to give us 105%, I think it was, of the sale value, because they charged the buyer.
They would hold on to it until the town could decide what they were going to do with it, and if in fact we did decide that we were going to sell it, then there would be no costs incurred.
So the reasons we acted, we haven't made a decision to sell it. We haven't signed a consignment contract to get it sold. We simply have it in a secure place where it will be insured and it will be safe from the environment, from theft, from vandalism. So I want to make that abundantly clear to you, sir.
Yeah, I know, you seem pretty sure that you've done the right thing. I understand that.
I'm confident I've done the right thing.
Yeah, well...
I'm confident I've done the right thing.
We'll
differ, but I'm confident I've done the right thing. As soon as we announced this picture was available to us, and we told people that we had found it in our midst, we had taken it out of the community for safekeeping, and we announced to the school committee and members of the town side of government what we had. Everyone that I talked to on the school committee when I was chairman said, that's great, it's a great opportunity for the town, we can have a trust fund. People's minds were rolling right away. Virtually everyone I talked to on the town side of government when we disclosed that to them had the same intent. But lo and behold, when we had a school committee meeting to discuss it and to formally vote on the sale of the picture, things changed.
I think it's very important that when the town receives gifts that we do as much due diligence as we can to find out what the original intent was. I think it makes a lot of sense that when people give something to the town that they have some sense that their intent is going to be followed out.
You can't sell something you don't own, and you really have to be darn sure that you have ownership of something like that. The family felt his grandfather didn't donate the painting. They let the town view it. The town felt like it was donated.
It was a gift from the 5 members of that family. Charles Thompson, his wife, and his 3 adult children. They were the donors of the gift. Charles used his money to buy it, but the family participated and were the donors for this gift. And that's what it says on the plaque. Gift of, and then it listed each of them with their dates of graduation from North Attleboro High School. This was something that they felt was really important for the students that would be at the school seeing it. It was there to inspire appreciation of fine arts.
Was it willed to the town? Was it,
well,
do we have any information at all on the circumstances?
Well, one thing we have is the plaque that came off the picture.
Right.
And it's been in the paper. It simply says Afghans by Alexander Eikaloff, and it gives his date of birth, gift of, and then it states the family and presumably the children's, and the dates they graduated from high school, I believe it was.
Was that what you think it
Yeah.
is?
If you check the school committee meeting minutes from February 1951, clearly there's no indication that Mr. Thompson ever intended for this painting to be given back. I believe he came the first time to tell the school committee he wanted to give it to the school department, and he came back after it had been hung, which, by the way, he did.
The information that we had is pretty much the same information that we've got now. Very limited minutes in the school committee minutes about it was presented to the school committee in the community school, which was then the high school, and then put up for the enjoyment and for students of North Attleboro to view.
I think if there was a condition, we'd know about it, and I think that if someone wanted to assert a claim against this piece of property that's been with us and publicly indicated as a gift, they'd have a hard time in any court. There's something called latches, but
I understand.
and I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah,
but
I'm not talking about court. I'm not talking about anything.
No,
I'm talking
but I
about-
think it's important that, I think it's reasonable for us to assume that it's our property. And, the issue of the intent of the donors, it's, we can't go back and say what they thought they may want to use it for, but if it's a gift,
I
it's
agree.
a gift.
I mean,
And
I've been
then
looking for
and
real
the school- and it's up to-
documentation.
But it's up to the school committee to determine if their property is to be sold or not sold. I thought the school committee was going to vote to sell it that night. We were approached by John Rhino immediately before the meeting saying we've got to slow this process down. The Smith family has some concerns, so we let the Smith family address the school committee. I said, do you believe this was a gift, or do you contest the fact that it was a gift to the North Attleboro schools? I didn't get an answer. I posed the question again. Finally, after this back and forth, I got the answer that I thought I was going to get, that he did not believe it was a gift. At best, I believe the gentleman thought it was a gift with a condition on it that says, if you don't keep hanging that in that school for perpetuity, we get it back. We, I guess, would be the heirs of the donors, which was Mr. Smith, and if he has any siblings, those folks. Well, at that point, the attorney of me took over, and the battle lines are drawn.
There's been a public cloud on the title. And when you have a cloud on the title, whether it's your house or it's your car, it has to be resolved in a certain way. And in this way, it's either going to have to be solved by way of mediation, arbitration, or having a judicial hearing resolved.
It was a public charitable trust. It wasn't, I'm giving you something that you can use any way you want.
It's unfortunately brings to the forefront a discussion of the constant sellout mentality that often prevails in this town.
The school committee, seeing what they wanted to see, they thought it was a gold brick just hanging around in the school. And it was worth a lot of money, and it should be cashed in, and the money should be put to some of the uses that the school department needed for it. And then they weren't thinking about the real substance of what this gift was all about, and didn't contact the people. They would have found out that it was there to inspire appreciation of fine arts.
I can't believe you just picked up the plaque. I can't believe you're holding it in your hand.
The plaque for the painting was taken off the painting, and it was sitting on the desk. And I could see, I was with Mr. Smith, and I could see how hurt he was that they took that painting, the plaque off the painting. His mother's name was on it. His uncle's name was on it. Just created a lot of sour taste. And from that time on, it kind of went downhill.
I guess I'm going to have to make the statement. This is a reflection of kind of a gold rush mentality, in my family's opinion. And one can see from reading that article in the Chronicle that treasure was found. You couldn't get it out of the town fast enough. You couldn't get it into other hands fast enough. And quite frankly, using kind terms, it was poor form. This gift was never intended to be about money. And unfortunately, that's what's driving the situation ever since you got wind that it has potential value.
As soon as we let people know that this thing had monetary value, there were a large number of art connoisseurs in town who just really wanted to appreciate this painting. And, you know, through the whole story, from my perspective, there's only one person who really understood art that was involved in this process, and that was Chris Frost, who's the current chairman of the school committee, who was an art major in college. And what he explained to people is that what a painting depicts matters.
What I do know about art is it seems that history is what makes art significant. And I don't think Alexander had this intention, that it would be discussed in this way when he made this painting. And I don't think your grandfather, was a great-grandfather, had that, would ever even imagine this.
It's funny because, you know, having studied art, you know that there are things that people fight over. You know, one of it's land, the other is love, and then there's art.
I think to best honor the intent of the gift at the time is to be able to cultivate more appreciation of art and why art is important to us. It's like having a Ferrari in your driveway, not knowing how to drive. You know, I mean, why is it a piece of art? Is it because it's big? Because it's got a frame? I mean, I bet most of the people in this room couldn't answer why it's a piece of art. Because it's a painting? So I think if we can honor, and I don't know what his intent was when he gifted it, when he gave it, when he hung it up on the wall. And I don't think any of us really know 100% because we can't ask him. But I think if it was to better the appreciation of art in North Attleboro, I think the best way to do that is to create a means, a vehicle in which these kids can do that.
One of the meetings that we all had was, I think it might have been one of the first school committee meetings we had, where we were discussing whether or not to sell it. I challenged everybody in the room to tell me why it was an important piece of art. And it was just blank stares. People, they could say, well, it's because it was painted by this guy. Okay, well, why is that guy important? Like, what did he contribute? What was significant about that?
My name is Anna Weinstein. I'm the executive director of the Ballet Russe Arts Initiative, which is a nonprofit based in Boston that does arts projects connecting the U.S. with the post-Soviet region in the visual and performing arts. I'm also an art historian, finishing up my doctorate at Oxford University, and a recognized specialist in various areas of Russian art and theater history. I've consulted for Sotheby's, and I have consulted for nonprofit organizations as well on various aspects of art history, provenance, and arts programming. The painting was created in 1932 and depicts Afghans on horseback sitting down, and is part of a group of paintings that Yakovlev created in his studio in Paris after his return from his second expedition with Georges Marie Hart. Now that expedition was through Asia, and what happened was that unfortunately Hart died in partway through that expedition, and everybody had to return home. However, they'd already made their way through parts of Afghanistan and Kyrgyzia and elsewhere, and so Yakovlev, as in his first expedition, had been doing a lot of charcoal and sanguine studies, a little bit of tempera sketches. Tempera is sort of a paint-like material, a little bit like watercolor, but more opaque. And so Yakovlev, as before in 1924-25, did sketches on site, some paintings, and then he really used that material when he got back to Paris in his studio to create larger format, larger scale, important works depicting moments of life from some of these places that he had been. What characterizes the painting is it's got sort of a slightly more vivid chromatic palette than some of his other paintings, and makes it kind of very lively. And that again is something that I think he was maybe consciously introducing in the studio as he was evolving, and he's exploring sort of a looser stroke and an even more dynamic painting technique.
Mr. Thompson was friendly with Alexander Yakovlev when he was associated with the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. And when Mr. Yakovlev died, Charles Thompson became the executor of his estate and helped his widow dispose of or sell his paintings at an advantage. This particular painting, the Afghans, was sold to the city of Fitchburg, and I think the city bought it for $1,100 back in probably the early 50s, late 40s, and it was on display at their library. They bought it and had it on display. Mr. Thompson went to Fitchburg and bought it for $4,000, thinking that it would be a really inspiring work for his beloved North Attleboro. And the place in North Attleboro where it could be displayed was the public meeting room in the high school, the auditorium.
The auditorium was where any kind of a ceremonial thing took place. Things like honor society events took place there, and things of that nature that were important.
When I was a kid, they had barbershop, quartet contests there. 90% of your activities were there.
I went to high school, and for the 4 years that I was in high school, that painting was there. As kids in school, I mean, you know, I can't tell you how many times we looked at that thing.
It wouldn't be like putting it in the auditorium of the now high school, but that high school, the community school, when it was the high school, that was the center of North Attleboro. I mean, that was the hub.
It was the largest school, it was the center of the community, it was where everything took place. So beyond the students, there were many people from the community who also came into that auditorium. Part of the impact was the fact that it was so large. It was enormous. It covered a whole wall. And, you know, when you first went to the high school, it really was impactful because it was larger than life.
I think about all the boring meetings I spent in the auditorium of the high school. The town meetings, the planning board meetings, the zoning board meetings, all these meetings where things were happening. I was in the audience waiting for my turn to participate, and I'm looking at this thing on the wall. It's huge. It's just a huge work of art. And you think, wow, somebody painted that. How would they even think about painting something that big?
That painting hung in what is now the community elementary school from 1951 to 2007, 56 years. And I can assure you that people stayed away from it by the thousands. And the reason is that it has no connection to this community. It doesn't depict something that would be of importance to the citizens of North Attleboro. The only reason people got interested in this painting is because they were told it's worth something.
Nobody in the school administration or any of the teachers or anything ever talked about that painting so that we could have some instruction about where that scene was, who painted it, how did we get it, why was it hanging there. I never knew anything about it. And so it became just part of the daily routine, and after a while you didn't even notice it anymore.
I remember comments like, I remember someone saying, a town official saying that, well, you know, if we bring the painting back and we put it in the police station, people's grandchildren can come and see it. Well, you know, a year before we knew anything about the painting, the principal of that elementary school, community elementary school, contacted me and asked me if he could take it down.
My kids grew up under the shadow of 9/11, and they saw the painting and they made connections to what they were seeing on the news at the time.
At that point in time, children were well aware of what Osama bin Laden looked like. And all of the 11 characters in that painting are dressed exactly the way he dressed.
That painting depicts a bunch of Afghanis that were probably running either poppies and or heroin at the time through Afghan. There's armed guards there, etc. So it's got nothing to do with the culture of this country. If that painting had depicted a scene from Appomattox or something to do with the Civil War history or World War II or the Revolutionary period, that would have been sitting in a prestigious place within the town of North Attleboro, and no one would have had even an inkling to sell it.
There's not a lot of historical significance to North Attleboro as far as the community, other than a community member having come into ownership of it and then wanting to share it with everyone.
So where is its value? Its value is in the culture of Russia, and an auction process was going to allow Russians to bid against each other, and that's where the money was going to come from.
What drove the Russian art market to its peak in 2007-2008 was partly the economic upswing that took place in Russia in the early 2000s, driven largely by energy prices. So it was a combination of the means to acquire art, a resurgence of interest for Russian art that had been lost to Russia, if you will, for a while. And also some of these people were beginning to dip their feet into collecting. So they weren't sort of veteran collectors yet. And sometimes in their enthusiasm, they would fight very hard to acquire certain artworks. And they were not doing much collecting outside of Russian art. And let's say they weren't really buying Impressionist art very much at that period of time, or old masters. And so you have collectors new to the market who are excited to buy art, who are excited to buy art by artists from their own country, especially that have not been seen in Russia, and you get some very spectacular sales, very spectacular prices.
The first battle that was going on was between the school committee and the Board of Selectmen, is who had the actual authority to sell the painting.
There was a lot of discussion about authority to sell or not to sell, and that discussion started first and foremost with a discussion between the school committee and the Board of Selectmen. The school committee actually was divided at that point in time as to whether they did want to sell or not. But before they even got too far into the conversation, I think they wanted to make sure to confirm with us that they had the authority to sell it if they so chose. At that point in time, it was still the authority of the Board of Selectmen to sell any property that is part of the town.
By the time we got done, legal counsel had determined that only the Board of Selectmen can authorize the disposal of any property that's owned by the town.
We're set up in this town that if the school committee wants to sell its property, the school committee has to vote to sell it. Then it's up to the selectmen to vote to sell it. For people to think that there was, we didn't have the authority, we know we didn't have the authority, but even though they voted not to sell it, it's still within our control, us being the school committee. So at that time, I'm chairman of the school committee, we make overall policy decisions. The day-to-day control of the personal property of the school committee and the policies and the implementation of our policy rested with one person, and that was Rick at the time. So when Rick and I discussed it, I said I would back, if he said we have to ship this out for safekeeping, I'm all for that. That's his call, and that's the call he made.
I had gotten a phone message from Steve Clapp telling me that he had faxed over a letter, so I made sure to grab that and bring it here so the committee would have the opportunity to see it.
My letter to the school committee outlines a way to do it without going to court. Talking about how it would happen in court, yeah, we did talk about that, but we said the family doesn't want to do that. We want to resolve it some other way, and we proposed ways to resolve it.
This suggests effectively that you give the painting away, you give it to a trust, that Mr. Clapp suggests that the gift be redocumented in the form of a written public charitable trust. That effectively is actually undoing the gift, in my view, and the school committee would have to dispose of the property by giving it to the trust. I'm not at all sure how you would go about doing that, but the trust, as Mr. Clapp has suggested it, would then be created by 3 trustees, one appointed by the family, one appointed by the Board of Selectmen, one appointed by the school committee. Those 3 trustees would then have effectively complete authority to determine what to do with the painting now and in perpetuity.
I'd like to clarify that the trust that's being proposed would give the trustees the authority to do anything that they felt was appropriate with the painting, including selling it, and that the purpose of the trust is to encourage the appreciation of fine arts among the students and people of North Attleboro.
The Smiths offered to put up a lot of money. They were going to insure the painting, they were going to put it under glass, and they could put it at the police station.
I do note that Mr. Clapp also notes that the family is volunteering to make an upfront donation of $50,000 to the trust to facilitate the trustees' immediate duties. I assume that is so that the trust would have the money necessary to try to take immediate custody of the painting, so to speak, and provide for its immediate care.
It would cost significantly more than that to create a safe haven for it. You can't just hang it in the police department. That had to be hermetically controlled. It's got to be encapsulated. There's a myriad number of things that to safeguard the school committee's property. We still weren't going to give up custody and control of that.
The family had come forward to us with an opportunity to put, I think it was, trying to remember, I think it was like $50,000 or something close to that number, to help pay for the security and everything for the town, and which was great, but we still had no place to put it.
There was some talk about putting it at Town Hall.
I came back in as town administrator in August of 2007, and one of the first things within the next 6 months was the selectmen asked us to research what it would cost to relocate the painting from Sotheby's to Town Hall. We contacted a lot of specialists. We talked with companies who do restoration, shipping of the painting, hanging of the painting, securing of it, preserving it, and obviously we talked to our insurance people. We felt the initial cost was going to be a little over, almost $19,000, a little over $18,000 to bring it up here. And then the estimated cost, including the insurance on it, which was $2,500 a year just for the insurance. But when we looked at, keeping it upgraded and the conservator and security equipment maintenance and so forth, that we'd probably be talking around $5,100 a year to secure and insure the painting in Town Hall.
The $50,000 is not blackmail. It's $50,000 that would allow the trustees a free hand in deciding what needs to be done without having to feel that there's only one choice. We don't have the money to insure it. We don't have the money to transport it. This gives the trustees the money to care for the picture, make the proper choice, and if it's sell it, sell it. But the money would be there for this ongoing purpose forever, for the encouragement of art appreciation in North Attleboro.
There was a discussion as to the family and or other people putting money into a fund. And the question was, how much would that fund have to be? We actually did a calculation that if the fund earned 4.5% interest, which was happening at that point in time, they would need to come up with about $132,000 to cover the first $19,000 and then have enough in trust so that the earnings from it would support the $5,100 a year in maintenance.
But again, even that money, although it certainly would have probably allowed us to initiate and get the painting secure, at least initially, we would still end up with a cost over time for as long as it was displayed in town.
And they just failed on all fronts to produce any type of documentation to show in perpetuity they could safely store it, safely insure it in the appropriate environment that could still ensure kids to see it, and yet keep it within the school committee's province. It just literally died on the vine. And what Rick and I collectively decided that during this period of uncertainty and turmoil, or political turmoil, we're not going to have this picture being brought back to town. It's staying where it is.
If it's not appropriate to keep that painting today because the market is so good, then the trustees should decide to do the right thing, and that could be sell it. And that's the only purpose of this trust.
Thank you.
Why I have been so passionate in my posture regarding the sale of this picture. And that question has been ringing in my ears for the last couple of days. And it was hard for me to answer, but I think I'm prepared to answer it now. My job can be boiled down to one sentence, and that is to do what is in the best interest of the children of North Attleboro, present and future. That's really it. The thought that I have most often is that in any sort of a debate or problem, typically you can find moral high ground. And I've learned over the years that it's wise to try to occupy it, because if you do, you have a real good chance of sleeping very well. And in this story, I'm certain that Mr. Mnuchin and I and the majority of the school committee identified and occupied the moral high ground, which is the benefit to children. And if the others involved in the story at that time had joined us, those who had the authority to sell the painting had joined us, it's hard to minimize what we would have achieved and the impact that this might have had on children for the past decade.
If you vote yes, you vote to sell. If you vote no, there's no action. It would just stay in limbo the way it is.
Yes.
All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Opposed? 2. That is in favor. Just for the record, Mr. Pickering, Mr. Cummer, Mr. McKenna, Mr. Frost, and myself vote yes. Those voting in opposition are Mr. Calcia and Mrs. Meelan. And for the record, there are no votes in abstention. That motion carries. Now it's on the town side. If they didn't have the political courage to take it where it should have gone, school committees acted in their best interests. We acted in the best interests of the kids in North Attleboro. We voted to sell it.
A public charitable trust is something that happens when a person makes a gift to a municipality or public body with strings attached. If the public body decides to accept that gift with those strings attached or with the understanding, it becomes a trust. And the public body has a fiduciary obligation as the trustee to carry out the wishes of the donor.
I wrote to the Attorney General. I think it was at the request of the family, but I honestly can't remember if it was at the request of the family or the request of the school committee or the Board of Selectmen. But my question was, this gift that was presented to the town, is this something that we are allowed to sell? And I got a very lengthy letter back, 2 pages, maybe 3, that explained what a public trust meant. And it was fairly clear in the letter that that was not something that could be sold.
The essence of the Attorney General's letter, as I recall it, was that it was their opinion that it was not an outright gift that we could do with whatever we wanted to, that there were conditions to that gift. And the conditions from the Attorney General's perspective prohibited us from being able to sell it without getting the consent of the family.
Sometime after that, I was asked to reach out again and ask for further clarification and to invite the Attorney General, I believe it was the Assistant Attorney General, who came to town for a personal speaking to, I believe it was the Board of Selectmen at the time, to speak to them and explain the nuances of a public trust.
They basically said, well, you can't sell it. That's okay, so now what do we do with this whole thing?
I thought that letter was way off base because, first of all, they didn't have all the facts. You know, we can get an attorney to give any opinion, but it was arguing that it was a charitable gift and it was in the form of a constructive trust. That's a legal term of art, and that we held it as a constructive trust. The only person that can decide whether we hold it in a constructive trust is a gal or a guy with a robe on after an appropriate legal proceeding.
The only way we could find out what can be done with this painting is to determine who owns it. Now, the only way to determine that is to actually go to court to find out who owns it. And I would imagine legal fees, and we've discussed this a little bit, could range anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000, or who knows how long this thing would run out. We could spend our money other places.
After a certain fashion of time, you know, my attitude was to the selectmen, why don't you vote to sell it, and if we get sued, then we defend ourselves. It's a valuable asset for the town. We should do what's right. No one that I know of on the Board of Selectmen at the time had the political courage to say, we're going to make a decision to vote to sell it, and if they sue us, we'll see them at court. They were deathly afraid of having a lawsuit.
Then there's no reason for us to relinquish any of our authority to any other board or committee at this
I've
point.
come to believe that strongly.
And if that's the case, then we need to take what the recommendation of the town council is and vote to sell it with, with the agreement with the school committee on disposition of funds.
So the discussion started between, us and the school committee, and said, all right, fine, if you're going to sell it, then we need a trust that's going to take that money and put it aside and make sure that whatever money is gained from this thing, it goes to the arts, for the children of school of North Attleboro to support it.
The school committee had their discussions. The division that initially was there as to whether they wanted to sell it or not sell it had been resolved. And so at that point, it really was now this granting the authority for the school committee, if they did want to sell it, to go ahead and do that.
It had been an area of consternation between two town departments for a long period of time. And the selectmen felt that what they wanted to be able to do was say, hey, look, we're going to turn over or release any claim the Board of Selectmen felt that they had or control they had over the painting under the condition that the school committee would operate under a trust.
The way those trust instruments came to be is I couldn't sleep at night once, and so I turned on the TV and the Board of Selectmen meeting was on. So I wanted to get to sleep. So there's nothing that'll put you to sleep better than watching either a school committee meeting or meeting of the Board of Selectmen. But my ears perked up when I heard that meeting, and their motion was, I'll agree to sell it if we have a trust instrument in front of me. I got on the phone with Chris Frost on Friday. He was chairman of the school committee at that time. And I said, hey, did you hear about what the selectmen did? I watched the meeting. This is what they're doing. And he and I, over that weekend, put together 3 possible options on a trust instrument. We brought them to the school committee on Monday with their intent to forward them on to the Board of Selectmen at their Thursday meeting.
One thing of interest right now that's on everyone's mind is moving forward, and part of the commitment that the Board of Selectmen had made was that they were moving forward if they could see us moving forward, and this is hopefully a gesture of that motion. As you'll see in front of you, you've got A, B, and C trust agreements.
We wanted a way, a vehicle for people in town to enrich their arts knowledge. Had the painting been sold, the funds were to become a trust for the town of North Attleboro, named after Charles Thompson. So it's a Charles Thompson Charitable Art Trust, or it was something along those lines. And it was divided into 3 pieces. One of it was funding for grants for enriching school programs. One was for community programs, and I believe one was for scholarships. So right there, it was going to be doing a lot more good than having an important piece of art hanging in the police station or city hall to be displayed as it was a gift, with no explanation of why it was important or significant.
The first one, the B, was the 30-30-10 that was the subject of a December motion by Mark Williamson at the Board of Selectmen's meeting. At least that's what I took out of it. So that's kind of, and there was reference at the meeting that was the substance of what they did. So that has to do with B. 30% goes to the arts. 30% goes to a community program.
Yeah, it was student arts, community arts.
An accrued interest to fund Williams Scholarship, the Arts Scholarship, 30% to the Arts Enrichment Program, 30% to the, well, they're listed there, and they don't touch 10%. It goes back into the principal.
Would the committee be able to consider moving forward with seeking a meeting of the subgroup, or?
Well, that still exists. You want to call a meeting of the subgroup?
Yeah, I can call that and get Tony's availability and your availability.
Yes, myself. Yes.
So there were quite a few subcommittee meetings between representatives of the school committee, the superintendent of the school, and myself and representatives of the Board of Selectmen to iron out the trust.
Is there something that you could consider or be involved with that might be able to fashion an instrument that might allow for the sale of the painting and carry out your family's wishes? To some degree. Not the whole degree, but to some degree.
Like you said, we don't have to.
No, you don't have to. I'm putting you on the spot, but I mean, rhetorically, it's a rhetorical question. But that's a question I think that has to be asked.
Approaching that makes us assume that the painting cannot be feasibly displayed in North Attleboro.
Without conceding.
It makes us assume that, but we can't
without
assume
conceding
that.
that point.
Because
I mean,
first of all-
otherwise we don't know what the option is.
First
Assume,
of
let's
all,
assume it can't be, for argument's sake.
That it
Say,
can't
let's
be-
put it, let me frame it a different way. Say you lose in court, okay, and the judge asks for input from the family as to how do you think your ancestors and your present relatives would be able to feel that they could, well, how would they give the opinion as to?
We think that Mr. Thompson would have been disgusted.
Why don't we give?
He probably would.
He would have been
But
disgusted,
given
he would
that-
have said,
and we'll
I
let the
placed a
judge
lot of
ask
faith
that
in North
question.
Attleboro, and I shouldn't have.
Okay.
The
The Cypre doctrine is what the court would apply if they went to court to do something other than display the painting. They'd have to get permission from the court. And the Attorney General pointed out exactly what would be involved in that and said the pitfalls are that you can't show that you can't carry out the purpose of the trust to display the painting. It is possible to do it. You can't prove that you don't have the funds to do it because the family's willing to put up the funds. So you really have no way to prove your case. So why bring a case that you can't prove? Why waste the money on it?
If a judge says that if the town owns it, that's going to be the model for the selectmen.
Right.
If the town says it's a gift, but
Right.
the school owns it, it's a
Right.
model for the schools.
Right.
Right?
Yes. This got
And if it's a
developed-
charitable trust, it's a model for that too.
Right. This instrument got developed as a result of my viewing the Board of Selectmen meeting where they said, I want to see a trust document in front of me before I approve the sale.
Just so we understand that.
Right.
No, and I think we've come a heck of a long way now. So,
Okay.
but I mean, I agree with it. And John agrees with it. I have no problem taking that to the board. And the final determination, Roger's right. It's going to depend on what the judge says. If it's a trust, whether it's a
No,
gift
but
or
this is
whatever
going to be
it
a
is.
model, no matter
This is
which
the
way it
model.
comes.
Whichever way it comes out, the two boards,
That has
we
to
all
be
need
kind
to
of a-
agree that
kind
this
of-
is what's going to happen,
Right.
regardless of the outcome of the judgment.
Unless it goes back to the family.
Unless it goes back to the family.
Well, that's okay too.
Do that too.
The intent was to clear the title, right? If everybody's on board, anybody has an interest, you get to clear the title and do something with it. The trust instruments had a team of people, including the family, who would be involved in promoting the arts, if that's what they wanted to do. But it wasn't carved in stone. That's why we gave them 3, so that the options were open for everybody to do whatever they wanted to do. So that's how the trust instruments came into being.
Up to 75% can be spent is the way this is written.
Of the interest.
Of the interest,
So
and
that
25% goes back.
25% would be retained no
Retained.
matter what. I will try and get a new draft over to you as soon as I can. Unfortunately, I can guarantee you won't be till sometime next week, but I'll get it over to you so you can go through it.
We hammered out, this trust agreement and everything with the school committee, and we agreed, we allowed the school committee to go forth and do it.
Now you're going to present this to your full board.
As soon as it's drafted.
We handed the trust, and I'm going to use the word custodial parent, to the school committee, and they were going to take it to court and see what they could do. Nothing happened.
It didn't seem to be a genuine interest. It seemed to be a way to get through that day, that that meeting perhaps to address it in a very token fashion. Didn't seem genuine by the time we got through that ad hoc committee. We produced all those 3 trust instruments. Their attorney looked at it, rough drafts as given as they were, but it didn't seem as if there was really, it was almost like a fake effort to try to resolve that.
When I get it, I'll circulate it. You any changes, or if they're minor changes, then Chip and I will work it out, I think.
That's right.
I don't think we need another meeting for it.
I don't think so either.
Substantive changes.
And we'll do the same on this end. For the paper, we've been approached by several parties. Elizabeth Poirier, Betty Poirier, as you may know her. We've also been approached by the family with a proposal to bring said painting back into town to be displayed in the interim while the decision is being made as to who is permanent home, whether it to be sold, whether it to be hung, whether it to be done, whatever. Now, this was also reinforced by the chief of police saying that he is not in opposition to this being held in his police station.
I was contacted by Greg Smith, and he explained to me that he had had meetings with Chief Riley, who was fairly new at the time, and Chief Gould, who was the former chief, that he would like to be able to resurrect the painting from the basement of Sotheby's and put it in the entrance lobby into the police station. Anyone who's been to the police station, there's a set of stairs you go up and then open a transparent door to actually get into the station. This area that he was speaking about was alongside the stairs, so it wasn't actually in the police station, it would be in the entrance hallway. There's a big wall as you're going in on the right, and that's where he proposed to hang it with all the proper lighting and security, which he said that he would pay for. He would pay for the removal, the transfer, the mounting, any kind of repairs that needed to be done, as well as the security and the proper lighting for the painting, so that it could be hung in town in a safe place where people would be able to come and appreciate it.
Through her efforts, the police department, the chiefs, retiring chief and new chief, decided that the lobby of the police station would be a great place for it. Now, this isn't the ordinary police station that you think about. This is a police station in another treasure of North Attleboro. The H.F. Barrows jewelry manufacturing building has been rehabbed and repurposed for the use of the police department, but it has public meeting rooms in it, a small conference room and a large conference room with a beautiful lobby. Using that conference room, you get the appreciation for the industrial nature of jewelry manufacturing. That's part of the building, and having it in the lobby is a wonderful venue, and the police department was very happy to do that, and they wrote a letter in support of that through Betty Poirier's efforts. The family agreed to put $50,000 to the purpose of getting the painting in a great restored position and protected in the police department. And they had a fine arts person consult, deciding what needed to be done to make that painting safe in the venue of the police department. And they talked about how it should be cleaned, how it should be protected with a shield that would keep the ultraviolet light off it, protect it from the elements if the sprinkler system went off or something like that. It would be well protected there. It would be set back behind a barrier, which was already there, which would be, very a good spot for it. And so through all this, the Smith family said, yeah, we'll put up the money. It's going to be $50,000 to do that, and it'll be more than enough money to bring it back and mount it and put it there. That's what they wanted to do.
I don't believe the police station is an art museum. That's my opinion. It's a place of business to conduct business and taking care of legal matters. That's just my opinion.
For one thing, I remember people criticizing the idea of hanging it in the police station. They thought that that was certainly not an appropriate place for it.
It would be a great teaching tool, bringing a 5th grade class to the police station to see that painting and hear about the history of how it was created, who Alexander Yakovlev was, and who Mr. Thompson was, and who Mr. Vos was, and what happened with the controversy, and how it ended up locked away, not in Guantanamo, but the Afghans were in Sotheby's, and how it comes back to North Attleboro. This would be a wonderful aspect to the history of the painting.
Who is going to pay to find out who owns it? Is that something that at this point, as a school committee, we want to pursue? Say, yeah, you know what, we're ready to spend the money to bring it to a judge to find out what that is. I don't know if this board is ready to do that.
We need to answer the question that was in the letter written to the superintendent. I think the first thing is there's a question that needs to be answered. They ask, can they bring it back? The family volunteered to provide transportation, but we need to know long-term, what would the insurance, who would be covering the maintenance and the insurance of the painting? And are they, I'm not going to answer the question.
Exactly. It gets it. Yeah,
I
exactly.
think the insurance piece is a huge piece. I think there's a letter that's probably 4 or 5 years old, 6 or 7 years old, in the superintendent's office that the former chair, Mnuchin, wrote about questions that needed to be answered before the painting could ever come back to town. So those questions still haven't been answered.
Yeah, this is a long work in progress, but the fact that we're all talking about this openly now, about what the actual, not opinions, not feelings, not emotions, this is what it comes down to right now, and I know I don't think any one of us here want to give up any member of the staff just so that we can find out who owns the thing.
Ultimately, Greg Smith's proposal to bring it back and hang it and take care of all the residual things was declined.
I wanted to bring it to light. I wanted to bring it out in the open so that, the people are aware that it wasn't just sitting, waiting. This is, in some respects, for some people, this is a very good thing. It's a very good, very promising thing. So I think it's important for everyone to know that the gesture's been made and that the interest is there. But then again, we have a responsibility not just to the public at large, but to our district to make sure that, we're doing the responsible thing too.
The previous administration, the superintendent, she had financial challenges, and there were things that she was facing that were drawing a lot of her time and attention. They had to close the school. They had to redistrict all the students. It was very, very tight financial constraints.
I'm not interested in taking $10,000, $12,000, or $50,000 to litigate this thing, but ultimately there has to be a clearing of the title to the property. And as I mentioned from the outset, that either has to be in a judicial forum by agreed upon arbitration or mediation, where you can give all of the information to a neutral third party in order to make a fair decision as far as what happened back in the 1950s. But I'm not willing to stand on town meeting floor and say, hey, give us this money so that we can litigate this thing. Certainly if the family wants to commence that, which I really thought would happen by now, this issue would have been aired and would have been resolved a long, long time ago. But they don't seem interested in that. I don't know what their motivations are. So from where I sit every day, I'll be going to a PTO meeting tonight where they're raising money for the kids. I'm not going to advocate any money to litigate this matter, unless, of course, it's something that we have to defend that puts you in a different posture. But right now, everything's preserved. It'll stay where it is, and if somebody wants to commence some litigation, we'll have to address that at that time.
It's been a while since I heard about the Afghans painting.
There's so many emotions that go with it.
Disappointment. It's been 10 years. and we've still made no progress in terms of determining the fate of that painting.
And it's just unfortunate that the way that things happened.
And I still remain very strong in that opinion to this day, that I think the painting should be returned to the family.
You know, a lot of people doing the right thing. They want to do the right thing. And a lot of people getting a lot of information from a lot of different sources. And, you know, just good people trying to do the right thing.
What are we going to be facing now? What kind of a challenge are we going to be facing? And what people are looking to see come out of this?
I would really like to see it come to a resolution, and the best resolution is everybody feels they didn't get the best deal.
There's countless children in this town that may never go outside of North Attleboro, may never go into Boston. What a nice thing it would be to have you know, a fund set up so that we could do field trips to enhance all of the arts, whether it's English, the language arts, drawing, arts such as what this picture represented. It's just innumerable.
Now recently, I was contacted by a member of the school committee asking if the school committee decided to give it back to the family, would the family accept responsibility for it? And I checked that out and told him yes, or I had him talk to Greg Smith, and Greg Smith said yes, we would accept it back if the town can't see clear to carry out its responsibility to display this painting as it can be displayed.
I just do not want this to get bogged down. I want a decision made. I want whether it's an agreement with people or total agreement, I want a decision made so it moves forward. We're not going to be in a stage of paralysis on this.
Sure, the Afghan painting was coming up on its 10-year anniversary of being in storage at Sotheby's. And what we noticed when I took over as superintendent was that Sotheby's started to give us a bill for storage. So it kind of made me raise a discerning eye and wonder, I thought the deal was that storage for this painting of the Afghans at Sotheby's was supposed to be free of charge. And so it started making me think about where was this all headed? And what I did was I started calling Sotheby's saying, well, what's going on? Why are we being charged a storage fee after 10 years? And they had come back and said to us, because we don't believe you have any intent to ever sell this painting or do anything with it, and we can't just store it in perpetuity free of charge until you decide what's going to go on with it. In the agreement it said clearly if we take it back without selling it, we still have to pay them associated costs for this painting. On top of the new piece that we just saw, which was paying for storage on this painting. And so I had worked a deal with Sotheby's where they were willing, if the painting did come back, to waive all associated fees of storage that they're starting to accrue, that we hadn't paid a dime on, along with not asking for any money that they felt they were owed in the agreement because we took it back. And so I wondered, after looking at all the research, if there was a way to bring this painting back into North Attleboro. And through that research, I found that they had kind of almost got to a point of agreement. And the agreement that the people and the powers that be had gotten to was the potential of bringing this painting back and having it stored at the most secure location in town, which was the police station. And that started a whole series of conversations that had to take place to allow that to happen. The first conversation would be, would the chief of police, who's fully in charge of everything that happens within his station, would Chief Riley be okay with allowing the painting to come back and be hung in his station house? And so that was the conversation number one. And Chief was kind enough and brave enough, as he always is, to say, yes, Scott, I'd let that happen. And he drafted a letter up on my behalf to the school committee to let the school committee and myself know that he would formally accept this painting if it was to ever come back into North Attleboro to be hung over at the police station. Next question was, well, if it was to come back into this police station, where would it be hung at the police station? We heard a lot of different conversations about the painting and how to treat it and how to care for it, where it should be hung, where it shouldn't be hung. And there was preliminary discussions years ago of possibly putting it inside the first set of doors that have stairs that lead up to another double set of doors that lead into the station house. And we called in a bunch of different people that specialize in artworks of this magnitude and created with oil-based paints. And they said that, because of the potential fluctuation in temperatures, that it wouldn't be the best spot to put it. It is a spot, we could put it there, but because the doors are open to the outside, the temperature fluctuates, and what paintings like to have is a relatively stable environment that if temperatures change, they have gradual changes in temperatures, not drastic from a warm environment, open a cold door, have it go in there. So then we started looking, the artisans started looking at different places to hang it within the station, and they had found the current location, which is beyond the double doors, to hang the painting that would fit in there perfectly. I had contact with the family to make sure that that we were all on the same page, to make sure that they were okay with what was happening and what was going on, because we didn't want it. The key was that everyone has to kind of be swimming in the same direction for this thing to succeed. Otherwise, we would have substantial, larger hurdles to maybe jump over. And so, the family was contacted, and everything from all the family members lined up with wanting this to be put back on the soils of North Attleboro in the police department. So now we've got online, we've got the chief of police saying he's willing to hang it. We've got a framing company that has a connection, which is amazing, to North Attleboro, who's willing to do the work, and we have a price for that. We have Sotheby's, who's willing to waive all associated costs for it. So now it's, well, how would we get this artwork over here? And Sotheby's has a company they contract with that transports these works of art across the entire globe. And there's a certain cost associated with that they said they would have to give to us. So I have a cost of what it costs to hang, I have a cost of what it costs to transport, and then we have associated costs for making sure it's insured during that transportation, and we made sure that's lined up. And so we had someone come forward as an anonymous donor to give us the money to make sure that the painting was hung, transported, and insurance was paid for. And now we had all these things lined up to say, we're not talking ownership. We're not deciding if is it the school committee, is it the Board of Selectmen, is it the donor family. We're not talking ownership here. We're just saying, instead of it being in the basement of Sotheby's, where it was sitting there and no one could see it, it's now back on the soil of the town that it was donated to be viewed by people. And if other people want to sort out who owns it and if it's going to be sold, they can sort that out. We just have it being now displayed somewhere in the interim instead of it being in the basement of Sotheby's. And so that was broached with the school department, school committee, and all the members, the Board of Selectmen, school committee, the donor family. Everyone seemed to be lined up in agreement with all these things that were in place, and then we made it happen.
So we're gonna go outside. No, outside. Yep, yep. Go down there. Yeah. Clear. Clear. You know when you're there. Clear. Set. Pitch. I think it's the new build. Alright, so I'm gonna check this side first. Picture? Yep. Just gotta get my angle right. It's just a matter of how I'm gonna get that deep. If you go that rail, please, thank you. Just need to adjust the lever. It's on the center. You know what? Others, they want to just straight up. You know, I thought about that, and I almost think I do. But I think I do, but you know, we got the guys here watching, so I want to just make it as smooth as possible too. So let's just do Straight up slow. We got about 24 to go. So now you gotta get 58 to 60 inches off the ground, and that's 5 feet. You guys okay? Yeah. So you know you gotta get 5 feet off the ground. I have look at my hand. Six.
This is actually a relatively straightforward job for us. We do a lot of big, heavy, expensive artwork all over New England and Manhattan. But each job is unique. We arrived here a couple of months ago to look at the space based on the sizes that we were given. And as you can tell from the wall, right along the edge of pretty much all but the top of this frame, there's some obstruction. So based on the measurements we had, we were tasked to find out whether or not it would fit and then how much it would cost for us to install it. So it would fit within a ½ inch. Unfortunately, when we arrived this morning, it was in fact 2 inches wider than the numbers we were given. So we had to make some adjustments on the ornamental beams that were sticking out of one of the walls. Fortunately, we were able to just handle that. The other challenge that you have with pieces like this, even though the piece is really true still, even though it's over 100 years old, the craftsmanship back then always blows me away. But there's always a little bit that skews it. It bows a little because of humidity over time and travel. It's been overseas. It's been all over the place. Then you have this building, which is also very old. So you've got settling. You've got things. If you put a level on the wall, your level might say one thing, but you've got brick mortar here, and your eye, even though the brick mortar, your eye is going to say that's dead level, but if you put it against the level, it might actually be cocked a little bit. So we had that going on in a couple situations where the brick was fading to one side, the floor was sloping to another, the vertical aspect of the wall was pitching out towards the floor a little bit. So all we can really do in that scenario is get everything up and get it as close to where we think it's going to look good. And knowing we were going to have these issues, we used some adjustable hooks so that we can get within plus or minus a ½ inch, which for us is we're usually within a 1/16 of an inch, but this gives us a little bit of leeway. Even with that, we had to take it down 3 times, reset the hooks, hammer drill into the wall, until we had it right. Another unique aspect of this space is that we're in a police department of a large town, and they're an active police department. This is where a lot of people come in. They're upset for various reasons. The police chief, I'm not making this up, the police chief was the one who said, look, I'm worried about this. There's fights that happen here in the middle of the night. They're open 24/7. So in addition to the hooks, once we had it adjusted perfectly, we took it down one more time, put in security hooks on the back of it, which bolt it to the wall, much like you'd see in a hotel or a restaurant. It's usually meant to prevent theft. Theft is not the issue here. There's no way you'd have to be crazy to steal something from a police department. Plus, it's really hard to get out the door considering the size. It actually only weighs, we were told about 48 pounds. It feels heavier than that to me. I would say it's probably closer to 80. But the hooks are, there's only 2 points of contact that were holding it originally on the top. And that is secure enough to hold it. Those are rated for 100 pounds each, so we're well over, you know, the load bearing of the actual painting. But once we put the security studs into the wall at the bottom of the frame, that effectively acts like a shelf that holds the weight from the bottom. And then the top hooks go from just holding all the weight to basically holding it against the wall with the security load bearing. So it's actually got 4 points of contact. You could do pull-ups on this thing at this point. It's very, very solid. Great art is like great people. I mean, sometimes you read about them, or maybe you might go see an exhibit about them or artwork in a museum, and sometimes it might be sitting right next to you, unnoticed for years. You know, my grandfather's a great war hero, but to other people he's just an old man. You know, until someone knows the story, then it's like, wow, I didn't know that this existed. And that's kind of what I feel about something like this. So you've got this fantastic work that's part of our society that's out there, and then it winds up in North Attleboro Society for years, goes dormant, gets rediscovered. The good story is it winds up staying here, and now it's part of North Attleboro's story forever. So I love stories like that because, you know, once you reduce art to just money, I mean, I understand there are reasons why sometimes that has to happen, but it's so much more than that, and so that it can stay here and stay in the town is, I just think it's a great story.
My job is just to help the town solve problems or issues that were long-term and long-standing. So I'm sure that there's a group of people who are very happy to see it be resolved. We saw a lot of articles in the Sun Chronicle come out about, you know, how they're happy of where it is. Yet some articles that came out that said it's unfortunate that it took 10 years because it was a possible lost opportunity. So again, too, when you're dealing with like 30,000 people, it's a mixed bag of emotions that come with it. But now, instead of having this hanging over the heads of a lot of people and being talked about a lot of times and referenced in maybe a negative way, well, now maybe it can be referenced in more of a positive way and discuss the history. This adds an interesting twist to the history of the Afghan painting. And if students and people in town visit the Afghan painting and follow the story of it, it does make for quite an interesting story of how the Afghan painting was donated, where it went, and where it is now.